The great liners. Well, I like to actually start this with why did we ever get the great liners? You know, why are we on a ship like this? Most of us here today are on it for leisure. One or two of you might be on it because you wanted to go from New York to Southampton a leisurely way. But predominantly, I think we're all enjoying ourselves on this fantastic ship. And the Atlantic traffic particularly started in an interesting way. Now, that's actually a ship called the Jeanie Johnson. It's a replica of the original Jeanie Johnson, which was built in 1847 in Canada, actually. And it was used by the owners of an Irish company known as John Donovan and Sons from Tralee in County Kerry. And it was an emigrant ship. I love it when I go to New York, as I arrived yesterday, and I showed my Irish passport. Oh, you're from Ireland. Oh, my great-grandfather was from Ireland. So, you know, I feel at home instantly. Anyway, the Jeanie Johnson is now, or the replica, resides in the River Liffey in Dublin. There she is. I was on it a couple of years ago. Beautiful ship. And it's great to actually have this history recorded. Keeps alive the memory of the 1 million Irish people. There were others, of course, but we're just going to start with the Irish people for a moment. And there was a great famine, which you may or may not have heard of, between 1845 and 1815. Actually, 1 million Irish people died, either in Ireland or on their way across the Atlantic. The Jeanie Johnson happened to be a very good emigrant ship. Some of them were terrible. They were known as coffin ships. In fact, as we sail back to Southampton, virtually every mile there would be countless tombstones, if you like, of people buried at sea. They weren't all Irish. They came from other parts of Europe, from persecuted parts or religious problems, shall we say, from Russia, Germany, etc. And indeed, most American citizens have got that kind of background, unless they came fairly recently. It's a fantastic ship, as I mentioned, and this replica was highly researched from the original. Interestingly enough, it has a figurehead, just like that one, and a little bit raunchy, that one, maybe, but the Victorians were like that, or funny enough, just before I left home to come to Manchester, to come to Newark, to come to the ship here, there was something on the AOL News item about a news presenter with a very low-cut dress. But in the Victorian days, having a figurehead on a ship reminded all the sailors of their wives and girlfriends at home. That's how that actually became about, figureheads. Coming back to the Irish famine, the potato blight was pretty drastic. And potatoes in those days were the main diet of Irish people. There was also the landlords, most of them absentee landlords, who didn't really support those people. I won't go into all that, you know, that's a big history within itself. But that picture, I love that picture in one way, and I don't like it in another, because it shows utter despair. There's that poor woman, you know, hardly dressed, almost, no shoes, cold, nothing to eat. I know we still have it in the world now. But it's a terrible way to be. So, Irish people had only one option. They were thrown off their estates because they couldn't pay the rent. They'd heard of America and Canada, indeed. And they saw their future in that kind of world. That's on the Jeanie Johnson, as it is today, that replica. And that's what the conditions were like. They were literally sleeping head to toe. But it was a good quality ship for its day, not like some of the other coffin ships. There was a place actually in Canada, I actually flew over it yesterday on my way to Newark. I was looking down, coming over Newfoundland and Labrador, coming on the Great Circle from Manchester. And there's a place on the St. Lawrence, couldn't quite see it, it was a bit cloudy at that point in time, called Ile de Grace, or Gile de Grace. I'm not very good at French, never did French. And the ships arrived there in a terrible condition, the passengers in a terrible condition, and they set up a quarantine station, and thousands of people died there from typhus and scurvy and all sorts of things. And there are many, many, many tombstones. Even the people who ran the station, the doctors and nurses to help, they all died too. So, you know, the whole thing really was a terrible disaster. Some, of course, survived and either stayed in Canada or across the border and went down to America, New York, and so on. You saw the picture they were in a moment ago. Very unlike what we're in today. Nice stateroom there. They were advised, of course, on their trip about what conditions would be like in the country of the States or Canada. And that particular poster, without going into all the detail of it, really says, work hard in the new country, be proud and enjoy the new lifestyle. Well, I'll tell you, I live in Yorkshire. My daughter now lives in Indiana. All right, they went there 4 or 5 years. They're new American immigrants, actually. My son-in-law works for Rolls-Royce and got a good job in Indiana, Rolls-Royce. And but the lifestyle, very different, new world. So this is the hope these poor immigrants faced, whether they're from Ireland or Russia or Germany or Poland or wherever. When, of course, they arrived at an immigrant station. I mentioned Ildegrosse. This particular one, I don't know where it is, just a painting of them being at an immigrant station. It could have been in New York, or it could have been in Canada or Quebec or somewhere like that. And again, that's quite interesting because there's a lady feeding her baby. There's a gentleman on her right there. If I can get my little pointer to work here. I can't quite see it from this angle. Anyway, there he is. Obviously from an Eastern Bloc country, I would guess, by his hat. There's another gentleman here, maybe a Jewish person, I don't know. But anyway, you've got all races, all mixes there. And there they are having to wait patiently to be approved to go in to the new country. Okay, so that's how the trade, particularly across the Atlantic, started. And, of course, the ships initially were sail, but then steam came along. And we had lovely paddle wheel ships like this one, the Sirius. It raced to be the first to cross the Atlantic under record time. And it took 18 days from Ireland to New York. Because it was burning coal originally, they ran out of coal about 4 or 5 days out in New York, and they had to burn the cabin furniture, the spars and masts and all the rest of it in order to make the rest of the journey. But they made it. Luckily, we don't have to do that kind of thing. So it was the beginning of steam across the Atlantic. Then along came a man some of you all have heard of, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, a great visionary. He, of course, was instrumental in setting up the Great Western Railway, or the GWR as it's called. And that was from initially to London and eventually to Bristol. And then he had this idea, well, I've got my railway running, why can't I carry on and get people to America, to New York? So he developed a ship called the Great Western. And she became the fastest ship. She was beating the Sirius, the one I showed you a minute ago, and the voyage only took 15 days. And would you believe she still had a reasonable amount of coal left when she got there? That's a lovely painting of the Great Western crossing the Atlantic. Brunel then, of course, being the man he was, didn't stop at that. He went on to build the Great Britain in 1843. It was the fastest and most comfortable ship of its time. And that's her leaving Bristol where she was built. Lovely painting again of that. Of course, we didn't have photographs in those days. And would you believe she's now back in Bristol? She actually did lots of trips, obviously across the Atlantic to the States and Canada. And then, of course, Australia started opening up. So she carried emigrants going down to Australia. She carried troops in the Crimea and the Indian Wars. She then sadly became a floating warehouse in the Falkland Islands and fell into a sad state of repair. And after 84 years in the Falkland Islands, almost as just a hulk, really, she was towed on a barge. I remember it well. I'm sure some of you remember it. a few years ago now, and she was brought back to Bristol and was restored. And that's her in a splendour. If you're ever in Bristol, do go to her. Now, I went there when my son was about 10 and my daughter was about 8, and she hadn't been very long in that. It's the same dock that she was built in, by the way, yeah? And we could go down the dock. You can't now. They've made it sort of like a glass structure so it appears like water. And we went down the dock with my son and daughter and wife, and they were chipping the rust and stuff off it, and I got a bit of her rivet at home, which is a real treasure. I didn't bring it here because I didn't want excess baggage. Lovely ship. And there's a nice picture of the Great Britain at sea. Even her propeller was revolutionary. This was Brunel, you know. Gone were the paddle wheels now. Here we were into the first propeller-driven ship. Everything was fine then, and of course there was competition, and then along came a wonderful man, and you wouldn't be here now without him, Samuel Kinnaird. He was a carpenter, and also owned a general store in Halifax. He was a great entrepreneur, and in 1840, he wished to bid for the rights of transatlantic mail service, and he formed what was called the Kinnaird Steamship Company Limited. One of the early Kinnairds, or the first Kinnaird, was a Britannia, and she also got the mail contract. This was very important, not only bring the people to the fastest possible way, but bring the mail as well. And that's why most Kinnaird ships, as we'll be looking at, have the title RMS. We don't, because we don't carry mail. It's all flown by whoever, FedEx, or DHL, or whatever you like, British Airways or whoever. But in those days, of course, winning the mail contract, and Kinnaird won it, thanks to Samuel. The original ship, one of the other original ships was the Royal William, built in 1834. And they really, you know, outbid the competition. And she had a sister ship, which was a two-stacker, as we call it, two funnels. Known as this is hard to pronounce, Etruria. Don't know where they got that name from, actually. But this particular ship you're looking at was the last to carry supplementary sails. And they plied the Liverpool to New York service. And they were the pinnacle of luxury at the time. Now, I told you I talked with Cunard and P&O. I was on P&O's Ventura, actually went a lovely trip to Venice a few months ago. And I said to the people that, oh, now you all recognize this flag, don't you? How many people recognize this flag? 6 people put their hands up. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, you all should be ashamed of yourselves because it's the P&O flag. And P&O was another company that was formed in actually 1822 by a chap called Brodie McGee. And they mainly started out going from UK to Spain and Portugal. And the company initially was called the Peninsula Steam Navigation Company. And that, of course, led to what we now have as P&O. They eventually extended their routes to the Orient, brought the passengers to Alexandria, transshipped them by camel. All exciting. I could spend all day just talking about crossing the desert on a camel to get from one ship to the other. No Suez Canal, you see, then. Not like we have now. That was one of the early P&O ships, the Tagus, going down to Iberia. And then when they started going to the Far East, we had ships like the Kashmir. And, of course, the canal was built in 1869. And, of course, the journey got better. And that's the P&O Devonia. That's actually a portrait of her at Hong Kong. And by now, of course, she was the Peninsular and Oriental Steam Navigation Company. Lovely ship, the Persia. As I say, loads of ships. I've only got time here to talk about a few. Now, you all heard of the term posh. Yeah? We all like to be posh, or so we think. And it does come from the P&O days. Because in those days, if you're going from the UK, if you're in the Indian Army and you're bringing your wife and family, or whatever you were doing, if you're going to India for business or whatever, you'd want to go port out and starboard home. posh. So you would book, go to your agent and book a cabin on the port side going out and the starboard side going back. That meant that you weren't exposed to the extreme heat because those particular sides, depending on the journey, were always in the shade. And of course there was no aircon or anything like that. So that's where the word posh comes. Again, a beautiful picture of this. Just imagine the days here, the Victorian days, wealthy people on the ship going in what was then good luxury. Back to our friend Brunel. We wind back here to 1858. He was still carrying on, doing all the things, and he decided to build the biggest ship then, the Great Eastern. And it had the capacity to carry 4,000 passengers around the world without refueling. And there's a picture of the great man himself, taken by the launching chains of the Great Eastern. Okay. He was another visionary, great guy. The kind of bloke I would have loved to have met, actually, and had a beer with, and I think he probably would have done. The Great Eastern, he actually called his great babe. That was quite an interesting expression. Some babe, really. And during the maiden voyage, the ship had an explosion, killing a few stokers. She continued as a liner, crossing the Atlantic from Britain to America for several years, and then sadly the trade fell off a bit. And in 1866, she became a cable-laying ship. But that was great in itself because it meant that Marconi and the transatlantic cable could be laid, and communication, it's a bit like a few years ago, with the internet. It was revolutionary at the time. So it all wasn't lost for the Great Eastern, really. During the launching, which was in Millwall in London, Brunel caught a bad cold. And that's a picture of him there. And because they'd had the tragedy of the explosion a bit later on, Isambard actually died a very sick man. But he was certainly a great engineer. And of course, he didn't just do ships, he built tunnels and railways and bridges, and they still all exist. Another picture of the Great Eastern there. Now, moving rapidly forward, we get up to about 1899, and that's a ship called the Oceanic. She was the first ship to exceed the length of the Great Eastern, and she was over 700 feet long, owned by the White Star Line, and she'd go at a speed of 20 knots. Built at Harland and Wolff in Belfast, a wonderful shipbuilder. I was tended to focus on British ships, but of course there were many others, and again, I can't go into them, but that's the SS Kaiser Wilhelm de Gross, built in 1897 in Germany, a four-stacker or four funnels, and sadly, that ship was scuttled in 1914 at the start of the World War I. We talked about Harland and Wolff. Now, they were great shipbuilders, as we've said, and you may know. And in fact, they're just restoring a lot of the old buildings there and opening a Titanic museum. I'll come back to that in a moment. But they had been building ships for quite a long time. And at the time, the directors of Cunard decided they wanted 3 ships built: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. And the Olympic and Titanic were the first. And that's her actually on the slipway at Harland and Wolff. Some nice old pictures here. And the Titanic actually sailed on the 11th of April 1912 on her maiden voyage. There she is. That's actually undergoing her sea trials off Belfast. And another nice photo. We're getting into the nice photographic age here. You all know the story of the Titanic. Now I have to come to a very sensitive bit of my talk, really, because I do have, a complete talk on the Titanic. And in 29 days' time, it will be the centenary. So I couldn't come on this Cunard ship, which eventually merged with White Star quite a few years ago. I couldn't come on this Cunard ship. We're actually going south of the Titanic wreck site, and the Queen Mary, I think, we're about 28, 29 days before the 15th of April, according to my calculations, approximately. And the Queen Mary will be passing it on another voyage in about 25 days afterwards. So you are making history as far as Cunard is concerned. But the reason I said to you it's sensitive, most of you know the story of the Titanic, and I decided because of events of this year, and you know what I mean, that I didn't want to be talking about doom and gloom. We've all come here, and we're safest we'll ever be. The only thing I think I'm not going to refer to the particular ship I have in question, but it happened this year in the 100th years after Titanic. And as a professional in the maritime industry, which I am, I run a company called Ocean Training, by the way, training officers on super yachts, leisure boats, and large ships, and so on. And the only thing I am going to say is I personally will be waiting for the marine accident reports of that particular accident. I'm not drawing any other conclusions. But one thing I do know is ships are as safe as they ever can be. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But I couldn't do the full Titanic talk. I would probably get too emotional, quite frankly, because I lost a lot of, apart from the fact some of my relations went on that as well. So I'll make that admission to you. Coming back to you all know the story, and of course the film was great, the recent one. The best one of all is A Night to Remember, black and white one. And it's worth me saying that in this particular film, I forget, is it something with C, Cameron or somebody? Anyway, I forget his name, the latest film. Was it Cameron? There's a lady nodding there, thank you. Did a wonderful job, and the photography and all the rest of it. But there was one major inaccuracy in it where one of the officers shot somebody. That didn't actually happen in history on the ship. They did fire above in the air to calm or try and keep passengers under control. And but it is a great film, and that's why I don't want to go through all the story. I'm sure you've seen it, and because of this year and so on. But she was a wonderful ship. And one thing I am going to do during this talk is to talk about the fantastic. She was cutting-edge technology, no doubt about that. And sadly, of course, she hit the iceberg. Okay, I'm going reasonably quickly through these because, as I say, you know the story. She was firing rockets, and there was another ship not too far away, 10 miles away, who saw the rockets and thought that she's on a maiden voyage, they're having a party. Communication, right? Now, we've come a long, long way in terms of communication. And one thing that I'll come to it in a minute is that this event did affect how we signal ships in distress, if you like, one with another. And that's, of course, where she rests now. So you're making history in being one of the two Cunard ships, or being on one of the two Cunard ships who's about to pass near it. There is one other company, who I won't mention, who's actually bringing a ship there at the moment, which will arrive on the 15th of April. Now, coming back to the, before I come on to that, 15th of April is the centenary date. The only thing I would like you to do, ladies and gentlemen, is quietly in your own thoughts, sometime on this voyage, when you've got a drink in your hand or whatever, do remember those people who went down. In fact, I actually worked with the RNLI. Just remember all those people who, over the many years in wars and merchant navy, my first ever captain I sailed with on the British Lantern, big tanker, he was torpedoed by the Japanese on a tanker. Imagine that. Luckily, he survived. Most of them were, terrible thing because you just goes up like a bomb. And he survived, spent 6 weeks in a lifeboat in the Pacific, in a lifeboat, was then picked up, but sadly, by the Japanese, and spent another 3 years in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Best captain I've ever sailed with, though. All right? One of the old school. And there is Captain Smith, the captain of the Titanic. He looks like one of the best captains you could ever sail with, too. And, of course, I mustn't forget our own captain. I haven't actually met her yet, and I'm looking forward to that. But she must be one of the best captains to be on a ship like this, too. So hopefully I'll meet her the next day or two. So in the centenary, I found this wonderful advert for the Titanic. There she is. And You've got advert for soap. I think it's called Venolia. You probably can't read it on the screen. Venolia Otto toilet soap. But I thought that was lovely. Lovely picture of her. Now, the only surviving pictures that were taken on the Titanic were by this chap, a Father Brown. Actually, he became Father Brown. And I told you I was from Ireland. Actually, my family come from County Wicklow, if you know that. And Father Brown lived in Cove, or Cork. Or Cove used to be called Queenstown before Ireland got its independence. And by the way, didn't the Queen do a wonderful job when she went to Ireland? And so did President Obama. Must mention that. Anyway, Father Brown was about to go into the priesthood. He wasn't then father when he went on the Titanic. And his family were fairly wealthy. And they said, look, before you enter the priesthood, we'll send you on a holiday on the Titanic. Join her at Southampton and leave when she gets to Cork, or Cove. Oh, sorry, Queenstown, as it was in those days. And that's a picture of Father. And he took these pictures with his box Brownie camera, which my mum and dad had. I've still got it. There's the people at Waterloo Station going down to the Titanic. Lord Astor there on the left. There are a lot of rich people on the ship, of course. That's the gym of the Titanic. This is to show you what a wonderful ship she is, or was, sorry. Bruce Ismay was the chairman of the White Star Line. Now, there's a lot of controversy about Bruce Ismay, in that he got in a lifeboat. Of course, it was women, children first, and still should be, of course. But he did actually get in a lifeboat. Some say he was in a fur coat and disguised as a lady. There's all sorts of rumors. I don't think he was actually in a fur coat, but he certainly did get rescued. Wonderful pictures taken by the future Father Brown. That's her leaving Southampton. And in fact, where we'll be arriving just sort of a little bit up from there. I know Southampton very well. I go to the boat show there and so on with my company, apart from going on cruise ships. On the way out of Southampton, when the Titanic left, she had a brush with a liner New York. Now, she was so big that as the ship went, and they were going too fast really, they didn't know enough about navigating big ships in small areas. And the suction caused the liner New York to swing out. And Father Brown actually captured that. Okay, the near collision with the New York. The tugs managed to get the New York under control, but you know, it could have been a bit nasty. She may never have done that trip, of course, if they'd hit one another. Thomas Andrews, a chap I have a great empathy for, he was the designer of the Titanic and went down with the ship, but that's a lovely photograph of him. And that's actually the room that Father Brown, or his cabin if you like, stateroom, you would call it, because he was a first-class passenger. He took that picture. Now, these wouldn't have survived if Father Brown hadn't left at court. He even took what is now a famous picture of Harold Bride, one of the Titanic's 2 radio operators, in his radio shack. Now, I've worked with people from Marconi and all sorts in my seagoing days, and up to very recently, all radio operators were still employed, even in my days, by Marconi. That's changed a little bit now. He filmed the life, or not filmed, sorry, he took photographs of the life on board. That is a very interesting historic, it's from the SS Burma, a distress message, and it says CQD-SOS. Now, CQD was the first term used. It means come quick distress. Right, CQD in Morse code. And that was used, but the Board of Trade and the rest of the world had decided to use this new thing called the SOS. And this telegram actually, radio message says, we have struck icebergs, sinking fast, come to our assistance, position, latitude, longitude, blah, blah, blah. All right, and it was picked up by the SS Burma. Now, unfortunately, there were lots of messages going backwards and forwards to the Titanic. And because there were lots of wealthy people, they were more interested in stocks and shares than they were ice warnings. And that's really how some of these are, 25 ships sent ice warnings to the Titanic. And they were often told, get off this frequency, we're busy. Working Cape race. because of financial affairs. We do learn as humans, don't we? There's a Titanic's bridge, not a bit unlike the kind of bridges I was on, actually brass telegraphs. Father Brown, or the future Father Brown, then left Cove on the Tender Island. They had two tenders in Cove, or Queenstown, one the Tender Island and one the Tender America, very appropriate. He had loved being on the Titanic, and he actually sent a message to his future bishop, saying, "Dear Bishop," I'm not quite sure how you address a bishop, actually. Maybe one or two of you could advise me. But really saying, you know, can I stay on this ship? And his parents were willing to pay the money. And he got this telegram back, "Get off that ship. We need you to get you ordained," and all the rest of it, or training for ordination. And that's how he got off the ship. And that's how those photographs survive. So I wanted to put those in just to give you a flavor of what a great ship she was. And that's the tender leaving the Titanic in Cove. That's the last but one picture of her leaving Cove, and that is the very last picture ever taken while the ship was afloat, as she departed on her maiden voyage. Now, I don't know how well these come out, but you can see here, I got some interesting statistics. These are first-class passengers that survived, and these are first-class passengers that didn't survive. All right? It was very interesting, this, because the class structure was very dominant in this period, as I'm sure you realize, and thankfully that's not so now. The second-class passengers, those that survived and those that were lost. The third-class passengers, those that survived, those that were lost. Shocking, really. And it gets worse. The crew survived, lost. So, ladies and gentlemen, just before we finish the Titanic bit, remember it's the centenary. You're now making part of history on this Cunard ship, and raise a glass to those people and others, as you wish. That's the emotional bit. Now, moving on, back to our history. The ship still developed, and that's the SS Mora, owned by P&O, in about 1920, taken in dry dock. Cunard then went on to build some great ships. That's a picture of a ship called the Lusitania. There were three, Lusitania, Mauretania, and Aquitania. And there's some wonderful portraits. I've only just seen them. You know, I arrived here yesterday, 2 hours before the ship sailed, pretty jet-lagged, and slept well last night. I've seen these wonderful portraits around of these kind of ships. Built in Glasgow by John Brown at Clydebank, famous. A lot of the tankers I sailed on were built by them also. And they were quite a breakthrough. They were fast. They won something called the Blue Riband, which is the fastest, an award for the fastest way crossing the Atlantic. And that's a picture of the Mauretania, actually, that one. Now, the Lusitania had a rather sad ending as well. She left New York in 1915, which, of course, a year into the First World War, which was beginning to really ratchet up, sadly. And warnings had been issued by Germany that both British and American ships could be torpedoed. Because obviously, as you may know or not know from your history, America at that point in time was not involved in the First World War. And that's anyway leaving Lusitania, or Lucy as she's commonly referred to, leaving on the trip to Southampton. That's her menu. This is a matter of interest. Now, unfortunately, as she rounded the southern part of Ireland and got off somewhere not far from Cork, called the Old Head of Kinsale. I'm sure some of you people know it, might have even been there. She was torpedoed by a German submarine. And Lieutenant Walter Schweiger was in a U-boat. He'd sunk 2 British merchant ships that morning, and in the afternoon he had a go at this giant 4-stacker, and with one torpedo he sank her in 18 minutes. almost as bad as the Titanic, where 1,500 and something lives were lost. On the Lusitania, there were 1,198 lives lost. Not many people think about Lusitania, but it did happen. Now, my father actually knew somebody, as you know, we're from Ireland, and he knew an Irish steward who was on Lusitania, and he'd actually come up on deck for a smoke. If he hadn't have done, he'd have gone down with the ship. So that was a pretty dramatic experience. A few paintings and portraits of that. Another great liner. Okay. That's actually a picture of the Lusitania doing her 202nd voyage. Now, P&O, of course, was still going strong, and in 1902, this is winding the clock back a little bit, she started to get involved in the Australian trade. And then, of course, things were still developing. In 1929, the first turbine ship was brought out. It was German, called the Bremen. And she was revolutionary. Gone were the old coal steam ships, and here was a steam turbine ship. Oil-fired, obviously. And in 1934, Cunard and White Star merged to form Cunard White Star. And the second Mauretania was built. That's here on the slips at Clydebank. Very nice advert there for the White Star Company. Then, of course, we get to more recent times. Two great liners, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth. Both did sterling service, both in the liner trade, crossing the Atlantic, and indeed as troop carriers in the Second World War, and indeed after the Second World War. And that's a picture of the two of them crossing not far from where we were last night, or actually where we were last night in New York Harbor. That's actually in the position where we left yesterday, one of the, what is now the cruise terminal, that's where the liners left from. And there you have the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth and the American ship. And there's two American ships there, in fact. I won't go into the detail. There's two wonderful aerial photos of them. And a very nice advert there for Cunard White Star. And it's very nice, I think, that we still aboard this very ship keep White Star for different things. The Queen Mary ended her days and is now in Long Beach in California, where she is a hotel. I've not stayed on, my brother stayed on it quite recently, actually, and he was commenting to me a few days ago as to what good condition she still is in. So if you're ever there, that's her bridge. Many's a time I had to polish these brass telegraphs when I was a navigating apprentice, or cadet, as they call them now. And you used to spend all Saturday morning. We only had one telegraph on the tankers, but of course, this ship, the Queen Mary, you can see had four. And there she is in Long Beach. And that's her restaurant. Her sister ship, the Queen Elizabeth, of course, was still going strong too. And that's her leaving Southampton with a tug alongside. Whoops, let's just go back one. Now, sadly, the Queen Elizabeth didn't have such a good ending, really, as the Queen Mary. She was bought by a company in Hong Kong. She was going to be made, but sadly, she caught fire and sunk. And then they managed to scrap her from the seabed, really. So the history of that wasn't so good. Then, of course, we get into another kind of era, the Canberra, P&O Canberra. She was a cruise liner of the 60s into the 70s, and of course took part in the Falklands War, as some of you may remember. And it was a different kind of era, really. The cruise industry then was beginning to decline. But Canberra mainly, in her latter days particularly, apart from the Falklands War, leaving that bit out, she was doing lots of trips to Australia, what they call the £1 pom. Sorry, £10. You could go to Australia for £10 on this ship. And I have a cousin, actually, who did just that, and now live there with their family. Now, you might say, what has a radar mast at Heathrow got to do with all this? The Great Light? Well, it's got an awful lot to do with it. Not only is it an advert for my Heathrow talk, which I told you about, I'm looking forward to doing, but more importantly for this, that's a picture I took, actually, in about 1972 or 3, something like that, I forget the year, of a Boeing 707 owned by Pan Am. This changed the whole history and method, if you like, of crossing the Atlantic. Why spend, 7, 8 days crossing the Atlantic when you wanted to go there for business? I think we're quite happy to spend 8 days going back, aren't we? Or shall we make it 14? Shall we ask the captain, can he slow down a bit more? I'm very happy to do that. And I'll even throw a few more talks in, as I've told Sally. Now, I only joke. We have a tight schedule to keep to. But obviously, the development of long-range passenger jet aircraft had a significant effect on these great liners. So the 707 at Heathrow, some other interesting airplanes there, but I won't bore you with those at the moment. Ships like the P&O Oriana were still going strong, doing cruising. The early cruise days, a bit like Carry On Doctor, if you've ever seen that film. Wonderful film, yeah? Funny enough, I have my old school friend, Paul. When he qualified in Sheffield and got his medical degree, he ended up as ship's doctor on this particular ship, the Oriana, and married a girl who he met on the ship, and the rest was history. But he did 4 years on that ship as a ship's doctor in the sort of 70s. And I even remember P&O ships like the Strathallan, like that. Sorry, Stratheden, beg your pardon. They had Strathallan, Stratheden, but this is the Stratheden. Actually in the Suez Canal with all the what we call bum boats alongside. I won't go into that one, but that's what they are normally called. Of course, I've been talking about a lot of British ships, and I know we've got a lot of American people. I can't forget you folks. You had the America, won the Blue Ribbon, the last winner of the Blue Ribbon, the fastest way to cross the Atlantic. And of course, because of all these Boeing 707s and other aircraft development, derivatives, these ships were having a very hard time. And that was how the United States ended up. Very neglected, and in the end she was broken up. Very sad ending to a wonderful career. Things got very quiet then, totally quiet. Apart from Cunard built one ship, the Queen Elizabeth II. But then, a company known as Carnival decided to build ships designed for modern-day cruising. And this is the Carnival Destiny, as you can see, built in the early 90s. Again, I knew a chap whose daughter worked on it as a hairdresser, actually. But this, again, was cutting-edge technology. But this was the start of what we know now, cruising, which is actually a booming industry, as I'm sure you know. That's the QE2 we talked about. Cunard had the wonderful vision to build another great liner, and that's the QE2. And there she is. She had many years of good service. Some of you might have been on her too. Statue of Liberty, and so on. Okay. And then, of course, we got to this era, Queen Mary II. I was on her last year, and I'm sure some of you have. She was actually built as a great liner. Her plating is slightly thicker than most other, I think. I don't know too much about this ship, but certainly it's Scotch, because she was built for the North Atlantic trade again. But not primarily, she was also built as a cruise ship. And then we get into, there's a Queen Mary II going under the Verrazano Bridge at New York. Only just clears the bridge, what we call the air draft. You know, you stand up and you see the bridge and you clear it by a few meters. It looks like you're going to hit it. But it's all worked out, and a bit more of that when I talk about navigating big ships. She's got a wonderful theatre, which is also a planetarium, and of course the ballroom. That's an interesting picture there of the size of Queen Mary II, Titanic, and an Airbus A380. You can see how big ships have become. Ventura, of course, I can't forget the good old P&O ships. That's another view of Ventura. And of course they get bigger and bigger. Okay, the Independence of the Seas, which was that one there. Okay, and that's what she looks like compared to the Eiffel Tower and the Chrysler Building. How big can they go? Well, that's her sister ship, Oasis of the Seas. you're talking about 4,000, 4,500, something like that people. Now, we're at the end of our talk, ladies and gentlemen, this morning, and I just have to put it to you that, yes, the question is now, how big do they go? Particularly in the light of recent events. One thing's for sure, we did talk about life being a learning curve. Things get better and better, as you know, and you've seen, particularly with ships, with this, and they will get better. Safety standards, all the rest of it, will be reviewed constantly. I monitor the IMO, International Marine Organization. They are the worldwide leaders in saying all ships must do this, that, or the other, or have this equipment or that equipment. And it's all exciting. That's all cutting edge. And it's going to change even more dramatically in the next 40, 50, 100 years. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. You do, of course, know the Cunard flag. Of course you do. I'm not going to embarrass you. Queen Mary II. I wanted to finish with that one because, yes, she is the flagship of the Cunard fleet, is a great liner, but so is the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Victoria. And there they are. There's the Elizabeth, and there's the Victoria alongside New York. Sorry, did I say New York? Thank you. It is Liverpool. Do beg your pardon. Yeah, yeah. The Liver buildings and background there. How could you miss that? At least you're all awake. That's a little test, you see. No, it's a little bit of Ted's jet lag came in there, I think. Now, finally, Queen Elizabeth, of course, the sister ship to this one. I can't let it go. Of course, it's her 50th anniversary as being Queen. And there she is. Sorry. Not doing well there, am I? I think a Guinness is going to be needed soon. Don't you agree? And by the way, that does remind me, yeah, I've got to have to finish now because my colleague needs to come on for his fascinating talk. But seriously, I'm at your disposal. I'm only too happy to answer questions about anything to do with marine, aviation, air traffic control, any of that. If you see me around, I will be around just outside there at the top. Give me 5 minutes to pack the kit away here. If you have any questions, please do ask, or if you see me around, I'm more than happy to talk to you. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll leave you with that. What will the next years bring? I look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.